We want to bring in our first panelist to talk about what Wendell was just telling us about and more politics. Joining us live via remote from our D.C. bureau, we have Richard Fowler, Democratic political strategist. And joining us shortly here on set for the other side will be Tony Sayek. He's a Republican consultant. He'll be with us and mic'd up soon. But first, let me get to you and say good morning, Richard. Let's talk about some of the details of Wendell Goller's report and moving forward and looking forward to what's happening this week. Your thoughts?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Laura. You know, I think what we're seeing from President Obama is we've seen something that we've seen from him his entire administration. We've seen him say that it's time for the rich, the millionaires and billionaires and big corporations to pay their fair share in taxes. You know, the fact that oil companies get big subsidies and make record profits, not okay when the middle class and the working class Americans are suffering. And on top of that, I think the argument that the president needs to articulate a little bit better is that raising the debt ceiling does not mean that we're going to increase spending. Raising the debt ceiling basically says we're increasing the credit line for us to spend if that becomes an option. But the president has said that he doesn't plan on spending anymore. He's actually cut, in the talks that were happening with Joe Biden a couple weeks ago, he's already cut $2 trillion out of the budget. And while doing that, he's also preserved a lot of the programs that are key to keeping our middle class and working class alive.
Absolutely. You know, like as Wendell was saying, people in both parties say taxpayers will take a hit if the debt ceiling isn't raised by August 2nd and the government defaults for the first time in history. So certainly a very interesting story to continue to watch. And there's another story that we want to talk about, jumping in, staying with Obama and watching his activities today and about his trip going to Iowa today. You know, we've been listening to, there's a story in the Associated Press today, Richard. The Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney is accusing the Obama administration of jeopardizing the very manufacturing jobs the Democratic president, of course, plans to promote when he visits an aluminum plant in Iowa. That is happening today. Obama is planning to visit Alcoa in Iowa to tout jobs the manufacturer has added in recent months. Company officials say Alcoa has added 240 full-time positions since December and has plans to fill roughly 60 more by August. Now, Romney, in his second bid here for the GOP presidential nomination, is blaming Obama for the sluggish economy and touting himself as the best able to take on Obama. He said, quote, yesterday, I am going to be running my campaign against the president. That is going to be my focus. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think first Mitt Romney needs to work on making sure he can shore up the Republican base of support. We saw in the last Zagby poll that, you know, Michelle Bachmann and him are tied. And for the fact that he's the front runner, who happens to be a governor who's been running for office for the past, 4, 5, 8 years pretty much, it's sort of sad that Michelle Bachmann has come out of nowhere and tightened up the polls on him, which shows that, you know, he's sort of out of touch with his party. But to go on and talk about this Alcoa, Obama's trip to Alcoa, I think what the president's promoting is he's promoting the new America, the Winning America Future budget, where we're winning America's future through manufacturing and, you know, working on getting manufacturing back on their feet. And that's what we're seeing. He's done a lot of work with a lot of companies and a lot of corporations, a lot of the Fortune 500 companies, and asked them and pushed for them to hire more Americans to do the jobs that America is doing. The president is trying to get America back to work. He's trying to work for the middle class and he's trying to work for the working class Americans. And that's what we've seen him doing. I mean, no matter what, understandable, everybody's hurting right now. There's no household that's left unscathed from this economic downturn. But since President Obama has taken office, over time we've seen 8% GDP growth. The president is doing the best he can with the cards he's been dealt. And, you know, what we'll continue to see from him is him showing an upbeat spirit about where the economy is going. Moody's recently reported that we're going to see an uptick in the economy in the next coming months. We're going to see economic growth. First, we're going to take economic growth because of all the reconstruction that's happening in the Midwest due to all of the floods and all the storms and tornadoes. So that we'll see a lot of construction growth. And on top of that, we'll continue to see more growth as the Japanese economy gets themselves back on their feet. And so I think we'll see an economy that's bustling and recovering, hopefully by Christmas.
Right, absolutely. You know, as we look at what the Obama camp is saying today about his trip to Iowa, they say that the trip today, the first to Iowa since announcing his re-election campaign earlier this year, the White House insists the stop will be about the economy, not politics. Though staffers are emphasizing Obama's ties with the state that jump-started his presidential bid with victory, of course, in the 2008 caucus. The stop is part of Obama's effort to promote job creation in the midst of an economic slowdown that reduced hiring and weakened his job approval standing in the public. A lot of people are raising a big eyebrow about this particular stop today.
Well, I understand why people are raising an eyebrow, but I don't think there's any reason to do that. The president's doing his job, and he's being the spokesperson for the United States economy. I don't think it has anything to do with politics why he happens to be in Iowa. He's not up in the Iowa caucus, so there's no reason to even think that would be the case. I think the president's just doing his job, visiting factories that are really and incentivizing these factories by a visit because of the fact they created 200 jobs, and they're slated to create more jobs.
Right. And you brought up Michelle Bachmann, and of course the big announcement came yesterday. So let's get your thoughts on when you heard the news and you watched probably the press conference with Michelle Bachmann yesterday announcing her run.
Well, first, I think Michelle Bachmann is a potable Republican candidate. Whether or not she could win the nomination, I'm not sure. If she does win the nomination, I think the president will win the presidential election wholehandedly. But what I think we can say about Michelle is that we have to take her seriously. I think it's very clear that Michelle will probably win the Iowa caucus. I was talking to a colleague of mine a few days ago, and we know from 2008, huck-a-boom with Huckabee, and I think Michelle Bachmann is getting a huck-a-boom in Iowa. We're seeing that the people. She's really resonating with the people of Iowa. I don't think she's going to win New Hampshire. I think she possibly wins South Carolina. And this means that it all comes down to one of my home state, Florida, and what happens in the GOP nomination battle. Whether or not the President Obama is scared of her, I'm not sure. I think what the White House is trying to do, which is a really good strategy, is triangulate her against Mitt Romney. By playing her up, it sort of diminishes Mitt Romney, and I think she's the lesser of the two candidates when it comes to competing with President Obama.
All right, Richard, I want you to still on set with us in Washington, D.C. is Richard Fowler, a Democratic political strategist. We've been talking about some of the top stories of the day. And while I still have you, we've got a few more minutes with you. I know that you too have a blog, as we're mentioning blogs. It's called Our Community, Our World, Our Future. Tell us about the blog where people can find you.
Well, thank you so much for talking about that. It's richardafowler.com. We do a lot of image, and we talk a lot about imagery and candidate imagery and such like that. The last post we had up was about President Obama's Afghanistan speech, where we saw true leadership, and we're talking about all the candidates on the blog. We'll hopefully have a piece coming out really soon about Michelle Bachmann and Michelle Bachmann's potency to the Republican GOP field. So definitely tune in, and if you're not tuning in there, follow me on Twitter, at Richard A. Fowler. We're talking about image, we're talking about politics.
Excellent. I don't know if I'm following you yet, Richard, but I'm going to be sure to today after the show. So if I follow you, will you follow me?
I've already followed you. I followed you during the break.
All right. Excellent. I like that. Instant. Okay. Richard, stay with us. I know we have you just a few more minutes. We do have the other half of the panel who has arrived here. We have Tony. I always want to pronounce your name differently, so say it for me.
Sayegh.
Sayegh.
Like the egg.
Tony Sayegh.
Is the narrative that's changed over the past month. When Osama bin Laden was killed, very ably by the Navy SEALs, and I do applaud the president for making that decision, I think there was this theory of inevitability that the president would be above and beyond where he needs to be for re-election. And in that 1 or 2 months, we've seen the economy take a dramatically negative turn under his leadership, aside from what he had spent the first year and a half or 2 years of his presidency trying to do to revive it. The economy now is slowing down again, and we're seeing a real opportunity emerge. The field is still very fluid. I was up in New Hampshire, I'll tell you the truth, and none of the candidates in the Republican field, in my opinion, have captured our total imagination yet. But it's still so early. Honestly, this conversation that there has to be this Republican frontrunner, and yes, Mitt Romney has it because of the money and the fact that he ran in 2008 and he is the presumptive frontrunner. But we have so much time at the end of the day to really build the right kind of candidacy to take on President Obama, who's going to have, at this point, a really tough record to defend when time comes to vote in 2012. So I think it's a great field. It's still growing. I, over the weekend, heard that former New York Governor George Pataki might run. Obviously, Rick Perry, governor of Texas, is a big name floating out there. So I don't think we could totally handicap the Republican field yet, but it's very exciting to see so many really able Republicans stepping up to the plate. Richard, your thoughts on his thoughts?
Well, I think, the president's narrative has been pretty clear, not only on foreign policy in Afghanistan and Iraq, but I think his policy has been pretty clear in the economy. We've seen since the president's taken office, like I said earlier, we've seen over time, we've seen an 8% GDP growth. We know the economy all the economists are predicting that the economy will pick up in the next half of this year. And on top of that, I just don't think the Republicans are articulating a clear narrative for their base or for independents. I think Mitt Romney is trying to play this game as trying to be the, I'm the front runner, I'm running a campaign against Obama. But sadly, he has competition that is that's really stirring up things. Case in point is Michelle Bachmann. She's been able to communicate her narrative as a mother, a lawyer, and a foster mother, and that narrative might go over well with certain parts of the Republican sector, not parts of the other. I think every Republican candidate has a little piece of what makes a great candidate, but none of them have the whole package. It might be early, but I just don't see where any of the candidates currently are going to get the whole package. And I think that's their biggest problem going into this election.
Well, the whole package comes when you factor two things. Number one, what Bill Clinton taught us in 1992. It's the economy's stupid. And if the economy maintains its position right now of weakness and getting weaker, and in fact, Richard points to GDP growth, the only thing that's grown in our GDP is the percent of government spending that's consuming our GDP. It's under President Obama, it's crossing over 25%, which is a high since World War II. And another variable is independence, and where are they going to go?
Richard, we're going to lose your satellite. Final quick thought, because we're going to lose you.
Sure. Well, I think you're right. I think you're right that, they have to, this is going to be about the economy, stupid. But the sad part is that the Republicans haven't articulated a clear message on the economy. They haven't articulated a plan for creating jobs. They've said they're going to keep making cuts. But they've shown none of these cuts have created jobs. So until they can show where they can create real job growth, they might fall into the same problem that the Democrats fall into when it comes with independence.
Excellent speed. Last